in real quick to typography as regards to what we have from our curriculum. So we're going to be talking about typography and it's actually for designers. What role does typography play for design and why it matters for design? Alright, so I'll go straight now to talking about typography. Why does it actually matter for designers? So typography is actually simple. Typography talks about using text in design, the use of text in design, and text is like the basic foundation of design because you're communicating something. You want to pass an information, you want to tell people a particular message. Okay, so it's very, very important that you actually understand the typography to use for a particular project and why you are using that particular typography. So every typography you use, every text you use in your design is actually intentional. Okay, you know why you're using it and you know what is going to work best for you at that point in time and for that particular project. So the your choice of font, which is typography, is determined by the project you are handling at a particular point in time. So the project determines the type of font you should use, and then after this class, we're also going to learn how you place your font, how they work, how you place hierarchy, and do your contrast, using size or weight. Okay, so why does typography actually matter for designers? Typography is super important because it's one of the basic foundation for communication. If you want to talk to someone, you write it. So it's very fundamental. It's the foundation, it's the root for communication. So when you're talking to someone, you sit out and you look at your handwriting. There are times where someone writes something to you and you find it difficult to actually read it. So if you're finding difficulty to read someone's text, that I'm talking about a written text now, that means there's actually no communication. So the bottom line of studying typography is to make your text readable. So the bottom line is readability. Can your audience see this? And not just the fact that they can see it, but can it grab their attention? Okay, and if it grabs their attention, how long are they going to be able to spend, reading your text? Can they read it? Do they find difficulty actually reading your text? So readability is the most important factor to consider when you're talking about typography. So if it's not readable, then that typography or that font should obviously not be used for that project. Okay, so that's why typography actually matters in design. So we are now going to talk about the types of typography. Now, typography is actually classified into four major aspects. Okay, four major aspects, and that we're looking at our serif, sans serif, script fonts, and our decorative fonts. So the serif font talks about hooks. So these are typography that comes with hook for the serif font. I don't know if you can see my screen right here. You can see this typography. This the popular text typography we all know in Microsoft Word. This is a Times New Roman, and it has hooks. So if you look at this C now, there are hooks protruding downward here, and just below it. So fonts like this are called serif fonts, usually hook. So serif is a Greek word that stands for hook. Okay, so that's what it means. So these hooks that you see attached to the stem of each of these letters, it's called a serif, and that's the reason we generalize any font that has hooks as serif font. So serif fonts play a particular role in design. They depict something very official. That's the reason in school, if you're writing a letter, I don't know if you remember, we always supposed to use the official vibe. And that's the reason projects like administrative work and the law firms, they usually make a whole lot use of serif typography. That's because it has this feel of being official and being very serious. So if you're doing a very official project and probably for a school or for a law firm, serif font won't be a bad idea at all. Okay, so that's what serif font does. As we proceed further in the during the duration of this course, we're going to also practice and learn more about typography and how to really use them. We're going to use a whole lot of them in different projects that we're going to be using as our practice files for the duration of this course. Then the next one is our sans serif font. So sans serif fonts are usually without hooks. So sans means no. So it means no hook, no serif, no hooks. So it's usually plain. It's usually clean. It feels more modern than this one. This one feels has a more feel of the old type of lettering and typography. That's the reason if you want to brand for really old brands, if you look at old brands, that's mostly the brewery industry. If you look at the brewery industry, check them out. They are really old, and you're going to find out that most of your typography is in serif. So if you really want to show that a brand is really old and they've really existed for a long time, you can also try using the serif font. It's really old. One of the first fonts to really exist in history, typography. So this one feels more neat and modern. Okay, that's the sans serif without hooks. So if you're using a sans serif font, mostly you find sans serif fonts in our web pages. All right. So if you look at our web pages, you're going to find our sans serif font. The reason why the sans serif font is used for our web pages is because it's neater, and usually readable on the web. It's more readable on the web, so it makes your web interface really neater than the serif font. So you rarely find this on web, but then you're going to obviously see more of this, your sans serif. So if you're working on projects for startups, a modern brand, you want it to really look fresh and clean and attract millennials, more of young people, then you should consider using this font, that's the sans serif, for your project because of the readability. It's very neat and it's modern and simple. Then we go to our script font. Script font is simply like a handwritten text. So the script font has coils around, looks like text written with a brush. Okay, so if an artist is writing a text with their brush or their pen, it gives this coily feel. And we generally term them as script typography. So this an example of script typography. This is what it feels like. This is what it looks like. So script fonts usually have a playful feel, a relaxing feel because of how they look. They are bent strokes, sleeping strokes. So if you really want to create a relaxing feel in your design, then you should consider using the script font. So if you're looking at a beach, you're communicating a beach kind of feel, then you should consider using the script font because it creates this playful feel and relaxing feel. So people enjoy looking at the script font. So depending on the project and depending on the type of perception you want people to get immediately, they see your design. So that determines how the font you choose, the type of font you choose to use for that particular project. Okay. So these ones are really good if you want to create a playful feel and you want to create a relaxing feel for your design. But you must be careful about using your script font. Script fonts can be very unreadable when used for a lengthy test. Okay, so it's very important that you know that. So if you're using, look at this. Um, let's take a look at this test now. Look at this test now. We're seeing this is really big, and we're having our smaller test. So we usually call this hierarchy in design, which we're going to discuss later. So what you see first when you look at this interface, it's obviously the bigger test, the bigger and the bolder test is what you see. And then the next thing you're going to see is this question: why does it matter to designers? Okay, so that's how you create hierarchy using tests basically. So when you are using for this now, if you want to play around this, we want to create a relaxing feel for this, we can only make this bigger text, which is typography, the bigger one, in script. It is not advisable to put a long text in script. So script can actually work better in headers, but not your sub header. That's your main write-up when you want to communicate more information. So you can use a script font to grab attention, create a playful and relaxing feel for your viewer or audience, but it's advisable not to use them for lengthy text because they can be very unreadable when used for a lengthy text. So that's what you should know about script fonts. They usually serve as decorative, they serve more like decorative fonts in a way. Okay, so if you want to write a lengthy text, it's usually advisable to either use like the serif or your sans serif, depending on your project, depending if it's a print or you want to use it on digital platforms. All right. So the last type of typography we're looking at is decorative type of typography. So the decorative font is usually not classified under your serif or your script, and so they are actually created for just decorative purpose. Okay, just decorative purpose. You want to add some design flair to your design or your project. You play around them, but then you still have to be very careful in using decorative fonts. You have to be super careful about them because they can actually be unreadable too when used for lengthy text. So decorative fonts is usually for decoration, just like the name implies. You want to add some aesthetics to your design, and so if you're using it, you must be very careful. Okay, decorative fonts work like this now. It looks very playful. If I use this for, imagine me using this for a law firm project, they're going to see us on serious. This typography looks really, really unserious. So this typography can only work if I'm doing something, a cartoon, or I'm designing something for kids. So you see, typography creates a perception, but if you're using this for a serious project, you're obviously not going to get the result that you should get. Okay, if you need conversion, and the aim of every design is to convert, is to increase sales for your clients. Okay, so if people see this, they are going to perceive you as really unserious. Why would you be using this type of font for an official or a professional job? So this looks really, really playful and decorative. So if you look at cartoons, if you look at children fonts, you're going to find that the fonts look playful. There are times you see the fonts really tilting to different sides, so it's telling you that this really playful, this fun, communicating a sense of fun, communicating a sense of child, kids, and things like that. And more often it communicates a sense that it's really not so serious. So if you're designing something that's really serious, you shouldn't come close to such kind of fun. So for beginners, we I would advise and recommend that you start playing around these two typographies first, but more of this because this is very readable and easier to comprehend by a wide range of audience. So it's best just stick with one font, use a particular class of fonts. When you master it, then you can proceed to using other fonts. Then again, mixing a whole lot of typography in a particular project in one flyer. The people, you see a flyer and it's having over 7 types of fonts, 3, 5, 4. Like the typography is just much. That's going to really be super noisy. I'm not professional project. So if you're using this class of fonts, ensure you stick with it. If you're using this class of fonts, consistency enhances readability. So when you're consistent in the font you're using, people can actually comprehend that easily and engage better. Want me to repeat? Okay, I said consistency enhances readability. All right, so it's please maximum. Okay, most times I usually stick with one typography. Okay, so stick with one across board. If you're doing a flyer, um, what's really important there is understanding the terminologies and how to manipulate typography, which we're going to be having a practical session probably in our next class so you see how we manipulate fonts. Okay, so I'm going to use one font for you. I'm going to use a very simple font, a font that we all would have in our a font that we all are going to have in our system, and that's Calibri font. It's a general font for everyone. If it's a general font for everyone, that's this particular font you see here, the Calibri font, the default font when you open your Microsoft Word or your PowerPoint, any Microsoft tool. So Calibri, I'm going to use this same font and still tell you to use this same font, and you're going to see it in your eyes or someone's eyes going to feel like I use the different fonts. So the font you're using, how you apply them really matters. Applying contrast and hierarchy, visual hierarchy, it's really important. So that makes it stand out. So that's what's important for your design. You have to understand visual hierarchy, which we're going to talk about. So it's not about it's really, even using a lot of fonts doesn't make your design aesthetic enough. It makes it look really junk and ugly. So those of visual hierarchy, which we're going to talk about. So it's not about and you're good to go. That's the professional work in design. So lastly, what we're going to talk about is terminologies used in typography. What are the terminologies that are used in typography? These terminologies are really important so you can understand how typography works. So this for a basic test, like I showed us earlier on, if you can, as you can see on my screen, the serif, which are the hooks. So the stem, these are the stems. The lines that you see here are what we call the stem. And if your stem is going upward, shooting upward like this, we call it an ascender. If it's going downward, it's simply called a descender. So we have our height. Our height is usually on the center region. You get so typography letters are usually in the height of X. Then some letters have what we call ascenders and what we call descenders. Okay, so they're important when we start applying them because then we're going to be looking at things like your Ken, Kern. Okay, your Ken simply means spacing between each letter. Okay, so the spacing between each letter in a test, a particular test, is called ken. Okay, so if I use the word your kenning is not good enough, then you should understand what I am talking about. Okay, then if I use the word lead, your leading, then it talks about this line spacing. Your line spacing, we all use, I'm sure we're all familiar with Microsoft Word. When you talk about line spacing, that's leading, lead in design. Okay, so if I talk about leading, you should know what I'm talking about. So these are important because you want your test to be readable. You want someone to see your test and be able to read it, whether they are close or from afar. All right. So if you're designing a project talking about large billboards, then you should know what you should do for a large billboard to ensure that someone far off, someone as far as 50, okay, let's say yeah, 50 meters away can be able to see the text in that billboard. So from now on, what you do is when you see a design, just analyze it, look at it, and begin to study what the designer is playing with, how the designer plays with text, how the designer plays with colors, how they place them. Look at what your eyes, pay attention to what your eyes sees first, what your eyes sees next, and what your eyes sees last. Okay, so it's important you pay attention. Just look at how your eyes hover around the text. What your eye sees first will be obviously what the designer wants you to see first. So these things are intentional. You don't just put every junk into a design project. You know why you're putting them there, and you know what message you want to pass, and you control this with these simple laws of typography. So for your height, we have what we call our baseline. Our baseline is simply the line where the letters start from. Okay, and we have the empty spaces. We call ears, the bow. Very important. These are curves, and we find that in letters like P, our O, and our G's. Our G's have more of a loop than a bow. Okay, so we have what we call a loop. So it's not in this test. Probably I will have to show you guys later. A loop looks more ascending. Okay, and what else have I not talked about? Okay, okay, terminals for tests with majorly either ascenders or yes, majorly letters like Y. I think what else? Which letter would have a terminal, depending on the type of typography anyway. Notice the difference between a terminal and a serif. Serif looks hook-like, while terminals actually look more like a golf stick. Okay, it has the curves are rounded rather than being squared or block as the serif itself. Okay, and we have what we call the ear, okay, appearing in some letters. All right, so these are just basic terminologies, and I'm sure we know what uppercase is and lowercase. All right, we're also going to know in projects when you're using uppercase and lowercase. So uppercase usually speaks more about emphasis and yeah, emphasis. And if you type for someone in uppercase or trim, imagine typing on your WhatsApp, sending someone a message, and you type all in block letters. It simply means you're shouting. That's what the other person is going to perceive, that you're shouting at the other person. So that's the reason when you look at most designs, you do not find designers use uppercase all through. So designers, most times the uppercase can come up for, you can use the uppercase for, let's say, your header, your major header, because you want to call attention. You're screaming it out, so you want to call attention. Then when you call attention, you can then type your text in lowercase, using lowercase. Lowercase feels more calm and readable for longer text. Imagine writing all your text in capital letters. It's like you're all through your design, you're screaming at your audience or your reader. Okay, so these really matter how you use them. So in our very first project that we're going to be working on, we are going to be looking at typography, designing a simple flyer using just text. Okay, this is going to enable us understand how typography works. So we're going to start with using just text, applying text. In our next class, we're going to go straight into looking at our Adobe Illustrator framework, and I think we have to look at how we can get as many persons as possible to have the Adobe Illustrator framework installed in their system. Okay, so the file size is quite large. I think it's up to 1 gig plus. So if you already have someone where you can access it, that's fine. You can get it from someone and get it installed. But if you don't, I will send a link for us to get access, download, and install. It's very easy to install. And in our next class, we're going to dive straight into the Illustrator framework and apply the rule of typography, which we just learned tonight, and design a flyer using just typography and fonts. So, mind you, there are a whole lot of fonts. There are millions of fonts that exist, millions that exist. Yes, someone is asking about using a font. Yes, I will also show us the Canva framework, obviously. So while I'm showing us the Illustrator font framework, I'm also going to show the Canva framework so that those using their smartphones will not be left out. Okay, so that solves it, right? Um, why? Yes, there are millions of fonts, and if you stay with me through the of this course, I'm going to give us the websites where you can download fonts, where you can access a whole load of fonts. But then your design is not the quality of your design is not dependent on the number of fonts you have. It's how well you're able to use them and apply them in your design. So I'm going to give us websites where you can get fonts for free and use them as free as you want. All right. So most fonts are actually commercial and licensed. So you pay a lot of money to use some fonts, some typography you pay to use them. And when you see how I'm going to show us the price so you know how expensive fonts are. Designers, we do not joke with typography. It's very fundamental and it's very important. So these are the things we're going to be talking about and learning about in our very next class. So when we're done with applying that, we're going to then proceed to looking at composition, visual hierarchy, and how they work. So we're going to just take it one step at a time so it doesn't look really bulky for you. Really good. Great. So if you have any question, you can drop them in the chat section. I will attend to our session in the next 5 minutes and we will be done for tonight's class. So like I mentioned in our last class, in our first class, I said whether you're using Canva or Illustrator, what is important is applying the rules and principles. So if you understand them and apply them properly, you're also going to achieve good results. That's readability. So whether Canva or Illustrator, you're going to see achieve a good result. Okay. So these to focus more on the I'm going to focus more on the principles and you understanding the principles rather than using the tool. Okay. So that's the reason where I'm taking time to read it instead of a particular tool. All right. The idea is not to just try to use the tool, but to understand what you should. You can't, if a tool you're used to, you can still work and produce good results. Okay. So I said for the purpose of this class, someone is asking what software is required for graphics on the laptop. I said for we're using the industry standard tool. All right, the industry standard tool, which is the Adobe software, Illustrator, and Photoshop. All right, but we're going to be using more of Illustrator, and we're going to talk about Photoshop in our week 4. Okay, and someone is asking, can Illustrator be downloaded on phone? Yes, you're going to find Illustrator in Play Store, but it's obviously not same at all as what you have in our system. All right, what you have in laptop. Okay, so Illustrator helps you create vector files, and the one in your phone is going to allow you make drawings, make sketches, and all of that. But it's really not as functional for as a design tool as the one you have in your laptop. So for a design tool, just have Canva, and I think Canva should be good for mobile. But, this course is actually designed to help you really achieve good results because the aim of design, you should understand that the aim of design is to convert. You want people to be interested, you want people to then read, to understand, to comprehend it. So first of all, you grab attention. Then what's next is comprehension. You want them to understand immediately. and then you have to put a call to action in CTA. So your call to action is should people should take action when they see your design. All right. So are people taking action when they see your design? That's really important to take note of. People should see your design and take action. So when people take action, what's all right? Thank you. So you if people take action, what happens is you're increasing sales for either your clients, or if you're doing it for yourself, then fine, you're increasing sales for yourself. So that's really, really, really important. Okay, and this course, if you want to take a 4 week course on graphic design, the content was given you out here on a professional basis, you should be spending nothing less than 50,000 naira. Trust me, for the duration of these 4 weeks. But we're going to be giving it out to you for a massive token, okay, which will obviously be communicated to us. All right, so it's really expensive learning graphic design using other platforms. You can actually check out other platforms and see what it costs to learn graphic design professionally. And in this course, we're teaching you the industry standard software and tools, so you can compete with China anywhere in the world. All right. So we are really careful with the tools we're using to teach you and the materials we're teaching you with and everything we're going to be giving you. If you follow this course closely and follow it meticulously, you're going to become a professional designer at the end of these 4 weeks. All right. So it's really expensive to learn graphic design as well. And so our admin will speak to us as regards that, it communicates more to us as regards that. Okay. Yes, I mentioned we're going to have a PDF, that's an ebook for this training at the end of every week. So at the end of every week, we're going to have the material for that week sent across to us so we can read and refresh our memory and have it. All right. And most of these recordings will also be made available. All right. So everything is really, in fact, it's something you can visit over and over again to learn more and understand more. All right. So see you next week. If there are no more questions, I think next week we're going to go continue with our class with our software framework and more fundamentals about design. All right. So thank you very much and have a good night rest. See you next.